You see, Chanel, I told you, I always forget. Thank you. Career pathways advising in grades 9 through 11. Welcome. The main thing I want you guys to take from these virtual meeting norms, please make sure that your name is your name and your organization or school. That helps us immensely um as we're doing our attendance later on, and you can sort of imagine that we will have to do attendance and report that out to our funders. So it would be greatly helpful for us to have that. These are today's objectives again, and I want to make sure that as I share them, I do a make take a second to sort of say that when I say career pathways or career pathways programs today, what I'm talking about is programs that offer the training that students need in order to advance, like maybe in the career that they have chosen for themselves. So maybe it's a program that leads to a certification in information technology, or it's beauty school, or maybe they're doing like a um some sort of like barber license program. Things like that is what I'm talking about. And we'll come back to that in a second as we go through my slides. First, let's do a little icebreaker question. I want you to think about what's one skill that you have that you're using regularly at work. So put that in the chat. Let's see what comes up. I'll highlight a few things and then we'll keep going with that conversation. I love that, Mariella. Canva skills. My son loves Canva. I need to learn. I need to learn about Canva. I know you can do slides, all sorts of stuff, and they come out all pretty. I love that. I love somebody put empathy. Marissa, thank you. I love that. That's a really important one. Communication, relationship building, public speaking, using that skill right now and regularly. I love that. I feel all of these amazing, important skills, facilitation, critical thinking, Jess, I love that. Taking in feedback to inform work and planning. Miss Enriquez, 17 years of experience, right? Where you've built like this um all of these skills, all of these competencies that you're using constantly. I love that. Time management, all sorts of skills. Carolyn, code switching. Love that. So there's so many different skills that we're using. It's really important. I love that you had them on call, right? Like, you were ready to talk about these skills. And that's a really important thing, helping our students sort of identify the skills that they need, but also like the skills they already have. Like the first one from Mariela was Canva, right? So if I'm talking to my son, and you know I got to always talk about my son who's a junior, it gives me like a particular context. I'm talking to him about his future. What skills does he want to develop? I can call out his current Canvas skills where he's teaching me how to do things. He did a vision board the other day without me even asking him on Canva. I thought that was really cool. So always using it, really important stuff. Love that. Love that. So we'll come back using the word skills a lot today. All right. So here's what I'm offering you here. This is a possible timeline for supporting a senior that's interested in a career pathway program. Great. Maybe you get a senior that knows exactly what they want, right? Maybe you're meeting with a senior in the fall of their senior year and they're like, Miss or Mr., right? Like, I'm interested in a career pathway program. Maybe you met them a little earlier in junior year, but like, what if you've been working with them or somebody at your school or organization has been working with them for longer, right? That's a different level of self-identification, right? So I'm just talking as a senior or I'm talking as somebody that's been thinking about this since ninth grade. To me, that's different levels, right? As long as I've been doing this work, and those of you that know me know I've been doing it for a really long time, I feel like we've been saying that these conversations about, you know, post-secondary pathways should get started soon earlier, right? And when I first started, we were just talking about college. And since then, we know that there are multiple pathways to success, right? So it's the field has evolved, we have evolved. But what we're talking about here today is what's the best practice in order to make sure that post-secondary decisions are informed and they're considered, right? Considered all my options as I'm making this decision, and that the student is centered, right? That it's not just a sort of saying, here's your decision. Everyone's going to college, that sort of thing. That's really important. And it's dangerous to not talk about it, right? To just sort of say what it is, make the decision ourselves, make a counselor-centered decision. Maybe we invite all of our 70s or students with a GPA of 70 and below to a career fair, right? But we don't invite everyone. That itself, that feels a little bit like tracking, right? Or maybe a student tells us in senior year that they don't want to go to college, and we're like, yeah, okay, let's talk in the spring when these programs open up. That's one way to do it. But if we have these conversations earlier, it'll be it'll be more student centered, and it'll give students an opportunity to really consider what's out there. And you're already doing some of the work, right? You're already doing things to introduce your students to college over the years. And the question then is, how can we bring in some of these career pathways into those conversations and help students make connections to those pathways as we're talking about um, post-secondary over the years? How can we do this best? One thing we're going to offer you is that um, it's not all that different, right? So I remember when I was a baby counselor at Goddard Riverside Option Center, and when we really had the time to talk to students, maybe we started meeting with them in the junior year. There were a set of conversations we have with them. And even once we hit the crunch time and we got a new student, like late fall, senior year, we'd have a mini version of these, right? So first, maybe we'd help the student through a self-assessment. Maybe we do a career inventory, a conversation about their college preferences, and then we'd find colleges that fit those preferences, and that they, had some relationship with like the student's interests and skills from the career inventory. Maybe we'd then research the colleges really deeply. At Options, we used to offer students a list of like recommended colleges based on these conversations, right? It's not that different if we're also including these career pathway programs. When you're thinking about supporting students around post-secondary, doesn't matter what the steps are and what the choices they're looking at are, we're still going to have the same kind of conversations around their interests. What do they want to do? It could be a field they're interested in, but it could also be something they're passionate about, right? It doesn't have to be exactly a career or a major. It could be about the skills that they're good at. Like you guys had those on the ready. You were like, here's the things I'm good at, right? It could be, like if we're helping students with college, we could be looking at their academic profile, like what's the transcript look like, or maybe some test scores. But for career training programs, we might also add um, a set of things that like their ability to show up on time, or maybe there's there a little bit about like how they can use their network, things like that. Goals, that could be a longer term goals that students have. What job do they want in the future? What do they want their lifestyle to be in the future? And then priorities, like maybe shorter term goals or what the student wants in terms of the post-secondary step that they take. Perhaps it's like they want the program to be short so that they can go right to work afterwards because they have to support their family, like whatever that they're prioritizing in their life. What I want you guys to keep in mind is that always the first step, whatever the student's going to do after high school, is to help the student self-reflect and think about who they are and what their interests, priorities, skills, and goals are. We can't skip that step because then we're in danger of imposing our own goals onto the student, right? Uh, and rather than making it a student-centered decision, right? Let me always make sure to look at the chat. Okay. So as we're going through the slides today, I want to take little breaks to go back to our career directory. One of the things I want to make sure, one of the objectives that we set for today is that we do see how the directory can fit into this kind of advising. So I want to make sure to always go back, right? So this is our directory. At the top, you'll see that we've got student resources, we've got resources for educators as well. And the thing I want to point out is that both of these kinds of resources are arranged into three buckets, and you can see the same thing here. The first bucket is focused in on using on students that are self-reflecting, that are thinking about, are still identifying their skills, their goals, the things we were just talking about. That's called awareness. Exploration is for students that have identified some of their interests already and are looking to pursue those and looking at some tools that will help them to research them. And then preparation is for students that have identified a program that they want to research. So we'll go through these in different ways today, but I want to focus in on awareness right now. And I want to point out that we have some resources that you can use as you're having these self-reflection conversations with your students. One of them here is guiding questions for one-on-one check-ins. And I want to say, for us, we just have this link here, but if if this was a student resource, and I'll show you that later, some of the handouts also have a second handout. So right here, you can see it too. Print and fill in worksheet. So you can either look at a Google Doc or print a worksheet. This is because some of our documents are hard to share with students that have an NYCPS email. So that's just wanted to kind of highlight that real quick. It just came to my mind. Anyway, so this handout right here, this is for you to use, is questions you can ask. Let's say you're having your IPR conversation today with a student, ninth grade, 10th grade, whatever. These are some conversation starters around these strengths and interests. And you can see them right here. Number two, what do you find interesting? What do you love doing? These are conversations that you can incorporate, as well as resources you can incorporate as you're having the conversation. So we have that. And then we also have a series of lessons that you can use around these interests, strengths, goals, all of these things. And each of them will have a lesson plan as well as slides and handouts that you can use, and additional resources, of course, too. So I just wanted to do that, to show you that. Let's keep going with our slides. I want to zoom in on slides from one of our lessons. This lesson right here is post-secondary plan 1. And this slide talks about purpose. And of course, I purposely chose this slide because this is another context that we can use. A lot of times we're talking about career as a context to like the explorations we can have with students, and um for about, like thinking about placing their post-secondary steps in career context, but career's not everyone's purpose, right? Not all students are motivated by thinking about their future career. So this is another way we can contextualize the conversations we're going to have with students. Basically, so this slide is from the lesson for students, but just to summarize it, and you can read it if you'd like, basically, purpose is a general life path that's centered on the student's passions. And it may or may not be related to a career goal, but it does help the student develop their goals and then focus on their post-secondary path that they'd like to follow by putting it, in the context of the purpose they've chosen. And one thing I'll say also, like some of us may have very established purposes, and that's generally how it works. But for a young person, it's totally okay that they don't know 100% what their purpose is and that they could change their mind. They could also just have sort of like, be like, kind of experimenting and an emergent sense of their purpose. That's fine. And thinking about like how a student might develop this purpose or might think about it, they can think about a role model. They may have somebody that they want to be like, or they may have tried like a series of clubs and different experiences at your school or outside of your school that help them develop this idea of who they want to be in the future. Or it may be a reaction to something, right? Like maybe their parent was in the hospital and they saw how broken the health system is here, right? And they want to make a change. So that could be different reasons, right? So anyway, the folks that know about purpose have identified these 4 purposes: career purpose orientation, altruistic purpose orientation, interpersonal purpose orientation, and self-oriented purpose orientation. Um, the thing that it helps when I think about what's my purpose, um, is that it helps me in, if I think about a student purpose, in a conversation with the student about who they are. I can look deeply into their interests. I can look at how a post-secondary institution can fit into there. A student can, or I can help guide these conversations. Um, Conversation like this with a student where we're talking about purpose can help a student zoom in on some of this stuff. It may help the student identify a college or a training program that they can stick to because if it leads them to the purpose, it fits into the plan that they have for themselves. And that to me feels really important. I want you to take a look at these 4 purpose orientations, and I want you to think about what is the purpose? What is your purpose? Like which of these 4 is one that sounds the most like you? And you could throw it in the chat. And if you're feeling really passionate about it, feel free to unmute yourself. I know my purpose orientation is altruistic. Kelsey's got all of that a little bit, right? For me, I know altruistic purpose orientation is really important. I haven't been making choices on money, believe me. It's not about money. It's about, to me, it's always been, I want to help people. I want to help people. And the choices, even as far as college, I went in, wanted to be a teacher. Then I wanted to, like, I was helping folks with like ESL that were in an ESL program at my college, and were trying to get their GED. So I was working on that. I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. But always with helping people, right? And then my boss was work had his wife worked at Options at Goddard Riverside, and I was like, well, that's what I want to do. Anyway, but always around helping, always around helping. That was really important to me. Yeah, go on and put it in the chat, Carolyn. Or you can unmute yourself if you want to talk out loud.
For me, if I'm talking about myself, I would say self-oriented purpose orientation. Just future lifestyle. I think after the pandemic, it taught us a lot. And I think that that's been more of my focus. But when I think about my students, I think for them it's more interpersonal purpose orientation, especially post-pandemic. I think a lot of that was missed, that transition period, relationship building, communication building. And so we're seeing a lot of SEL need and support.
Yeah.
At least I can only speak for my school and in the high school level and with some colleagues that are also in high school, particularly with ninth and 10th grade, with relationship building. So for me, I would say for my students, it would be that interpersonal purpose orientation at this moment, seems to be the higher
Yeah.
need.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, you were talking about that, and I'll get you, Marielle. I see you. Um, the thing I was thinking about, for my son, always a lens I'm using for him, I think it's a little self-oriented purpose orientation. And it's not a judgment. It feels like a judgment because I'm giggling, but to him, he thinks a lot about money too. He thinks a lot about like the things he wants to be able to accomplish. And even in shorter term goals, that's something that's really important to him. And I've discovered and sort of used it for my own purposes because of course I'm post-secondary counseling him at home a little bit. I can't help it. But in thinking about that, I've sort of been able to identify that just like in the conversations with him, and it's really been helpful in placing some of the decisions that he's been making. I do think it's generational a little bit too, Denise. I think so too. Mariella, what were you gonna say?
So good morning, everyone. I hate to be this person that like uses psychology and like social media, but I think because our students, are literally attached at the hip with social media, I feel like that influences like the purpose conversation a lot. Especially when you see how an influencer can make $1 million because they hit a certain amount of views. So I think, similar to what you said and the other colleague that was speaking, I feel like it's almost like
Carolyn.
50-50. Carolyn, that it's almost like 50-50. Wait, Carolyn Santana? Hi, friend. How are you? um, so it's like interesting because when I'm talking to like seniors, they're like, "Oh, miss, like I just want to make money." Like they don't care like what
Right?
the career is. They're just like, "Tell me what do I have to do?" They literally want like this blueprint. Like, tell me what I need to do to make money. And then I have like some middle school like ECCA students and then like some juniors who are like, "Oh, I don't want to go to college. Like, I want to have kids." And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" And so it's like so interesting because I feel like I always wonder like what the psychology behind it is. Like when I think of like the pandemic and like why do they want to have like why do they want to start families earlier? And I feel like if we look back in the history of like our country in general, I feel like those same like things happen throughout history, because I remember like, you know, my grandparents had kids at like 19, 20 years old and like got married and bought a house, right? And that was like normal for that time. And so it's like interesting because I feel like a part of me is seeing us going back to that. And I try to talk to like other significant adults in the school because I don't want to discourage the kids from that. Right. Because it's not, for me, it's like, that's okay that they're thinking that. I think it's great to like prioritize family life. Right. But then it's like, what do I give those kids to not make it seem like, oh, whatever, like you're delusional. Like, what are you talking about? And so I think that's like the biggest part for me, where it's like, how do you introduce that piece for them that want to do, more like self-fulfillment in their personal life, and like how can that connect to college and career? Because I feel like what do we give you once you that you can hold on to once you leave this building is like the big question for me.
That's very interesting. And a little bit is how we talk and the conversations we have, and a little bit is the connections that we're able to make with for them, by kind of dropping them in other for in other programs too, like thinking about like, once they leave here, like making sure that they're connected to somebody, to continue having these conversations. I love what
We
you were
need home
saying,
ec
and then
classes.
I want to think about that. I want
That's what we need. Remember those home ec?
to
I had home ec classes. We need those to
yes.
come back.
That's right. Sort of, you're talking about adulting a lot. That's sort of what it is. Like, how are we an adult? And I love the idea of embracing it, right? Like going with it. How do we kind of go with the things that are priorities for our students? And that's really important. Like, we can't uh, place these conversations about next steps in our own goals and our own, we can think about it, but just sort of having a goal for our students that you're going to do this, that's not enough. It needs to Students need to be able to own it, um for sure. All right. So along those lines, I want to hear from a few other people about, this is another slide from the lesson, by the way, but I want to hear from you guys, like along the lines of what Mariella was saying, like, what would you do, right? So you have a conversation with students about purpose. What would you do next? Like, what's the next conversation? This is how I did it in the lesson, immediate next thing. But what are other conversations that you would have? So now that I know my son's, oops, I'm not sharing my slide. Now that I know maybe that my son's purpose is around money, what's the next thing that I'm gonna be talking about? What's the next thing that you're gonna be talking about with your students? What's a way we can sort of place the conversation? Drop it in the chat or unmute like Mariella and Carolyn did.
I can share if anything.
All
So
right, thanks. So much.
and my students, usually what I like to do is once they tell me like what their goal is, and most of the time is I want to move out, I want my own place. We go through like cost of living, right? What are some things that you are necessities, and then what are some things that are wants but not necessarily needs? And then we go through the cost of that. We do a little bit of research on it. We do a little bit of, this is around the time where they're starting to get these mails and emails about credit cards, about loans, and all these things. So we do a little bit of financial literacy. And we have a class here at my school that goes into all of that, the stock market. Um, but for them to grasp that idea and to understand it, I bring it down to their experience, right? And so if what they want is to move out, okay, let's go online. Let's see what an apartment costs. Let's see what you would need. What is it to get a lease? What does a lease look like? What does it mean? What does a pay stub look like? What are taxes? What are the taxes for? um, what are dependents and all these things. And so we talk about it in that way in many different areas, right? This is not just the only time we talk about it, but it's a good initiation of the conversation when you bring it down to what their goal is. And if their goal is, which is it always is, to want to live on their own and support themselves and get the nice car, what it would cost them. And so then that turns into the type of income you would need, which then turns into what are you interested in. So it leads into multiple conversations, but usually that's where I start, and we kind of do a little bit of research of like, okay, what's the rent cost to get groceries, what it would cost you a month, and we kind of have an activity that I do, and we kind of build it that way. And then from there we dive into.
That's very
Mhm.
that's very interesting, right? Like thinking about what are, so if a student has a particular purpose orientation, thinking about what are some of the things that we could offer them that would be really interesting to them, and also build up the skills that they might need to fulfill their purpose. I think that's really interesting, and the ones that you said were really specific. Gina also talked about in the chat, looking at data, average income by years of education and careers. That's really specific for students that have the self-oriented purpose orientation, and maybe thinking about all the different orientations. Or I've been having conversations since ninth grade, and I'm really familiar with my students. So many of them have the self-oriented orientation, but a few of them are really focused on altruistic purpose orientation. So maybe I'm looking for some partnerships that may lead to something like for helping others or something like that. And I'm doing this other thing um, for my students that have the interpersonal purpose orientation that Carolyn I identified earlier. So thinking about different offerings I can have, and then recommend to the student that they focus in on. Did we have these fin lit classes, like what have you been working on, and engaging in conversations about that. I think that's really cool. I love that you mentioned that. um Also, for the kinds of explorations that might follow a conversation like this, there's in addition to like those very specific things that Carolyn, Gina mentioned, um other things that whatever it is that we offer, there's a grounding message that I wanted to mention here that we can offer to students, is that whatever their purpose orientation is, whatever if it's focused on a career, whatever the next thing that they're doing is, they don't have to like fully like decide right now. Like I feel like that's really heavy, right? To just be like, I am 100% all in. Some students are thinking that, but they can still, I'm all in. I'm definitely 100% going to be a barber. And that's it. That's all I'm sticking to my whole entire life. Uh, that it's okay to change your mind, that careers kind of take different, they're not a straight line, that there are going to be opportunities for me to kind of change my path this way or that way, to make a decision to increase my education, and then do something else, that it's okay to do those things, and that I don't have to be like, make my final choice of the next thing I'm going to do today. And then that's all I'm going to do. I can't go back to college if I choose a career pathway or the other way around. That's a really important thing to put out there. The other thing I'm putting out there is that as we help our students make these decisions, that we put out there the full landscape of the opportunities that are out there, the educational opportunities to students, right? To all students, not just, like I said earlier, like we're only talking about career pathways with our students with 70s and below. That we're only talking about college to students that have, 75 plus. That we're talking to all our students about all the pathways, right? So college, the military, these training programs, certificate programs, license programs, all the programs we've been talking about, all of them, so that students can really consider the different ways that they can go. And it may be, I'm going to follow, they may kind of experiment with like doing college now and then they're going to do another thing later, or they're going to start at they're going to choose a licensing program now and then they're going to go to this other thing later and based on their thoughts, and that's going to be fine. As important to convey that message to students, and important for us to kind of give them the space to make this informed decision. Kind of talking about that, when we're thinking about these these other programs, these career pathway programs, a lot of times we use the word trade school, but that can actually mean a ton of different things. So what you see here is some different types of programs that could be included under this umbrella, this catch-all term that we're using, trade school. So in New York, for example, there are tons of free training programs that are maybe funded by federal dollars or maybe privately funded or both. CUNY has a ton of certificate programs. Those are under the umbrella. Also, we've got boot camps, we've got apprenticeships. Those can help people get into union jobs, for example. Whatever it is, there's tons of different programs. We're using trade school as a catch-all, but it could be tons of different programs. So that's something to think about. And then I want to take a break to kind of look back at the career directory. We have information about a lot of those programs, but we also have resources for students to use as they kind of work through these programs, as they kind of think about what is a good next step for me. So college, military, this other thing, let's look at that. I want to show you one resource. Under exploration, career research worksheet. So maybe I'm using, I've done a career interest inventory with the student, or we've just been exploring tons of different careers. A student can then kind of use a sheet like this to think about what kinds of training and education do I need, to think about other similar occupations that I haven't looked at before. So a sheet like this is something that you can use. What are the skills that I need to develop in order to reach this career? Another thing I wanted to highlight, this is a new resource that we have. It's under preparation. Um, is this one right here, enlisting in the US military. So a little checklist that students can use to sort of go through the decision of whether they want to go into military life. So just wanted to make sure that we looked at a couple of those resources. Any questions? I see that there's no questions in the chat, but that doesn't mean there are no questions in the room. Um, Anybody have a question that they'd like to share with the group?
Hi, Sandy. I don't have a question, but I do want to throw out a scenario that I get stumped with frequently.
Yeah, give it to me.
Yeah, so it's around like the student that we're working with, and we're trying to help them to brainstorm what they're passionate about, and you're constantly getting, I don't know. I haven't done anything. I don't know what I want. I kind of like just hang out by myself. I don't really like to be around other people. And it gets to the point where we're like, we're not sure where to start. And so I have just questions around how to support this particular type of student.
That's such a good question, Crystal. Let me throw it back. Let me throw it not back at you, but also you, to the group. Let's hear from the group. Like, what are some of the ideas? And that is the thing, right? Like, a lot with even interested in. Some students may not even clearly say it, but that's sort of the message we're getting. What are some of the things that you all do with a student like that? Either throw it in the chat, preferably unmute yourself. Let's hear from you.
Cindy,
I
do you
was
want?
looking at you. I don't know if you knew this, but I was looking at you.
Hi everyone. So one thing that I actually want to offer about that, Crystal, because as Sandy said, it's really a real challenge, and we have a resource in the career directory that is specifically came out of a problem that was named by a school that was starting to do career conversations in ninth grade. So it's under the at the very top. I just double checked it. It's under awareness. And I think it's the very first educator resource that is guiding questions for, oh, sorry, maybe hold on, let me look at where I just saw it. It is, yeah, the very first New Visions resource under awareness, guiding questions for one-on-one check-ins. And this isn't going to solve all of it, but there are a few different points in here that are about some different ways of asking those questions, and different resources that you could point to. So, I think that's one thing to offer. The other thing that I would offer is that in an ideal world, right, you are working in a school or in an organization where you have other folks who are interacting with young people. And so that can be a place where having systems or structures with your team to do some kind of case conferencing about young people can be really helpful. The one of the sort of articles that's been really helpful for me in thinking about this is, which is actually linked in this document and we can put it in the chat, is this article that's called The Interesting Thing About Interest. And it talks about how young people can show up in really different ways in different contexts in terms of what their interests or passions or sparks are. So you may be able to get a little gem about what a young person, where did a young person show something that was an interest or something that they were really passionate about in an academic or non-academic setting that then you could bring into the conversation with them. If there's a teacher that says, oh, well, they were really engaged in these kinds of conversations, or they showed me their homeroom teacher says they showed me a picture on their phone of this thing that they were really into, that can be a starting point for a conversation. And I think that there's also the one other thing that I would say is that sometimes these conversations get really pressurized for young people, right? Like there's a feeling that they need to know everything. And I mean, I know I am much older than many of our young people, but sometimes when people ask me what my career goals are, I just say, I don't know. I'm just doing something because it feels like I have to have an answer. And when I don't have that answer, I just sort of say I don't have an answer at all. And so being able to make it a little bit more playful or a little bit depressurized so that they can take some of the stakes down, I think can also be helpful, which might also mean that it's not their guidance counselor, or it's not a formal conversation where that conversation is happening, where it's instead like a casual conversation in the lunchroom, or something that's an activity that's planned that they can be a little bit more exploratory with their friends. Yeah, and I see
I wanted to
Bernadette.
respond since it was my question
Yeah.
that I put out there. I love that idea because I feel like I do need the reminder that depending on the context of the conversation, you could like raise the stakes or lower it. And I think that does make a huge impact on like the information that we're able to take away from students. So thank you. And also for the article and resources.
And I just want
Yeah.
to, sorry, say I was just going to lift up what Bernadette said also, right? That it's really okay to not have everything figured out when, if especially if we're talking about 9th or 10th or 11th, but even for 12th graders, right? We really want to instill that life is something that you are going to make a series of choices over time, and it's okay if the choice that you are making right now is not your full-time permanent for the rest of your life choice.
That's right. Thank you so much, Robin, Crystal, Bernadette, for that. And thanks for sharing the article. It's also linked a couple slides back in under the slides too for you to look at. I love that. And to continue saying, I love saying that it's not the final choice. It's not a final opportunity to make a choice. Really like that. Really like the idea of that you mentioned, Robin, about talking to others at your school or organization that have been working with the student and then changing it up and making it fun. I love that, all the things you said. Very cool. Uh, let's look at another slide, right? As we're doing this kind of exploration, right? Like really important to keep working with the student to understand and think about their own priorities. What you see on this page is a set of things that's a student or a person can use to make a decision about whether a program is right for them. And it could, to me, like I really love this slide. I always say this because
Oh, Sandy, can I
it's
interrupt
a
real
lot
quick?
of those. Oh,
The
yeah,
slide's not showing on the screen.
no.
Sorry, I don't mean to stop your flow.
Oh, thank you. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, am I back? Okay, great. Sorry. Thanks, Jess. Thank you. I would keep pausing it so we can be in better community with each other, and then I keep forgetting to unpause it.
Wait,
Thank
no,
you so
sorry,
much.
it's not, it's, oh, now it is showing. Okay.
Okay, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you. Yeah, something happened. I don't know what happened, but I got the internet unstable message. Um, okay, so what you see here, I really love it because it was put together for these kind of presentations about the director and this kind of guidance around career pathways, but it's really the same stuff. It's really the same stuff I've been looking at for the most part for college, right? And it's important for me to think that because it takes a little bit of the pressure off um from feeling like I gotta develop like a whole new set of conversations that I'm having with students. It's all the same kind of thing. So this is a series of things that a student can use to decide if a program is good for them, right? And just like with colleges, different students are going to have different priorities, and it's really important to work with the student to think about what they want, right? And students sometimes come in with a ready-made list, and sometimes they don't. And like what we were saying earlier, sometimes it can really be difficult to get this because students haven't formed these ideas yet. Maybe they need to experiment a little bit. Like one thing I used to do when I was making a college list with a student was give them a little list of colleges to look at as they were honing their priorities, right? So let's look at some very different schools. So let's look at some very different programs that have different offerings, whatever it is, right? So looking at this, I want to hear from you all. Um, what are some of the ways that you can think about um, helping your student hone in on their priorities, right? So like what are some of the ways that you can think of helping a student continue to self-reflect and think about what they need in a program, what's going to be really important to them? Um, so that they can be ready to do the research. and find some programs. Uh, and then I want you also, as you're thinking about that, to think about how the directory can be helpful in these conversations that you're having with students. And feel free to either put it in the chat, but preferably, I really love all the unmuting that's happening. So if you can unmute, that would be even better. And then I'll go to the directory. So how can we prepare our students to like be able to identify their priorities? Not entirely different from the conversation, it's just like the next thing in the conversation we've already been having. No idea.
Danny, maybe I can help us get started. If that's, oh no,
Love
Elizabeth,
that.
please go. Please.
Um, I just wanted to add that I know I'm really fascinated by the categorization of purpose. I think that when I have students that say they just want to work after school, I'm quick to judge and say, no, you must have, like, you need a bigger plan. You have to have goals. And you're like, I just want a job and I want to make money. And I'm quick to go into like minimum wage work is not a career pathway. It doesn't. So I do, in saying all the things that I say out loud and I think in my head. I love the idea of students just being able to name what's driving their decision making and what they want to do. So this idea of being able to name like just self-oriented, like I need the purpose is to make money, and then to be aware of what some of the other purposes may be for them. I think that's really important. Um, and then in terms of just like career messaging for everyone, one thing that we've started to do is that before we go into overgrad and we do career research, we've started going into the New Visions directory and having everyone search for a program or something that aligns with their personal interest so they can see that there are multiple ways to do it. So like, yes, you want to be a nurse. Well, what kind of programs or trainings are there for someone who's interested in health? So we're having them do both. And I think we're offering both as choices, which is really different from, I think, the approach I've had in the past, where it's always been like a secondary conversation in a one-on-one small group while everyone else is researching colleges. Now we're kind of airing it as open discussion for everyone. So I think moving forward, what I would love to do is lead with purpose, understanding how we're making decisions, and then go into exploration of pathways.
I love that. I love that that idea of going into the directory and just find a program that goes to what you're thinking about. And I love that you're able to grab onto the priorities, the purpose conversation. I love that, and I can't wait to hear how it goes moving forward. Sylvia.
Um, Elizabeth, I hear what you are saying, but I'm gonna add a little bit to that because sometimes, like, we always have to be reminded that we have to love the kid we have and not the kid we wish we had. So when we have that conversation and a kid is telling us that, you know what, I need to make some money, because as we talk like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they could be down on level one, basic security needs, and we're trying to talk to them at a level five, and we can't get to that five unless we take care of that one. And we have some kids, even though they may, because I had a kid just tell me the other day that they want to try to get a fast food job because ultimately they would like to become a chef. And I felt like, I think that's a good idea, because in your head, it's one thing as you're watching Master Chef or Tournament of Chefs and Top Chefs, and you see people with these big endorsement deals making money, but it's a different thing if you are working at the Chipotle on a line chef and you and that and you have to come through those experiences, and you may feel after doing that, oh, maybe this is not what I want, because you're just looking at it through the lens of the people who've already made it and not what they had to do to get there.
I love that. Thanks, Sylvia. Absolutely. And take what you're talking about, is a student that's sort of experimenting with their interests, exploring it, but also they have their particular priorities right now, and that's something we need to understand. And I heard Elizabeth saying some of that too. Thank you for adding that. Jess, we didn't get to your comment. Tell me about it.
Oh, I think it was very much related. I was probably saying the same thing, which is around like um sometimes students have a shorter runway they have to work with to what Sylvia and Elizabeth were talking about. And they have to earn income sooner. And then also some students haven't felt great about school. They've been in school since kindergarten. It's been a long time. And so the idea of more school may not feel so great either. And so what would feel like something that they could be successful in? So I often think about duration of program, like how long could they like sustain something? And if they need sort of like some like pre-program work and they're really not sure, right? Like there's a bunch of students who leave high school and they're still kind of not sure, and we wish we could hold on to them and help them. And so there are programs out there that also help students figure out what they might want to do next, like the door or some of the settlement houses, right? So again, that pressure to know a thing, is still there for us. But I think Sylvia and Elizabeth said all the things I wanted to.
Right.
But
Thank you so much. Sylvia, thank you. If I can move on quickly, because I see we're at time and I was like all in the conversation. I just want to say one thing and show you one other thing. So one thing that I may suggest is using the directory, sort of what Elizabeth was saying. So we've talked about purpose. We've done some exploration, just sort of after that conversation, sitting here also and sort of exploring the directory. And I heard you guys say that a little bit too. Like, I'm going through it, I'm seeing what the questions are, letting that guide my conversation as a start, right? Let's see what programs come out after we look at all these filters, and then start looking at them. It's not our final choice, it's just part of the conversation that I can add sort of like the data in my head, purpose, these programs. I look at them, what kind of information felt important, that kind of thing, just like I did with colleges. And so that's just something else to add to the conversation, not wrong or right or the only way. Something that I might suggest. The other thing is that some of our lessons also have sample students to play around with. I've got some videos about another thing, Road Trip Nation's got some great videos where I'm showing folks that have gone through taken a one of these career pathways programs and they've sort of loved it or hated it or whatever. We can use that as data too to figuring out what my choices are as a high school, 10th grader or something like that. So those are just things to add to the mix. I want to say this. What's next? I want you to think about, even if you're sharing, whether you're sharing it in the chat or not, I'd love to you to share it because I want to hear always. What's one next step that you can take based on the conversation, the things that your colleagues added, that you can take this year with your students? And then what are some, or maybe something you can take next year with your students, plan for all your ninth graders, something you're going to do with a particular student. What's the next step for you? So put that in the chat. Also, please join our newsletter for the career directory. We're going to have their information about our monthly office hours. We're going to have information about training. We're going to have stuff about new programs we added, things like that. So just to stay informed about our career directory. So please do that. Also, while you're writing your next step, I want to share a little survey as promised. where you can tell us how we did. So I'm launching that, and go ahead and let us know how we did today. Um, yeah, so that, and then throw some of your next steps in the chat so we can share and steal. And once you're done giving me your survey answer and sharing, you can go ahead and leave. Right now, we've got 16 responses for our survey, so hopefully we can hear from the rest of you guys. We have about 10 more people. Thank you for attending. Thank you so much to all of you. Don't forget to give us your next steps in the chat if you can. That way we can learn from you. Thank you to everyone.